mother says he was a normal, happy boy until he became obsessed with black metal music.
Rock and roll! Satan.
Sounds like Christian Rick.
Heavy metal music. Groups promote satanic worship.
They're anti-peace and anti-life.
Before we get started this week, I've had to go see a doctor this week.
Oh, you okay?
Yeah. I've just I've been like really itchy.
Oh yeah.
I've just come out in this nasty thrash. Hey everybody, welcome back to the Metal Face Podcast, the podcast where we discuss three metal albums each week. This week, we're covering three thrash metal albums in what we're again dubiously naming a genre special. My name is Ben, and joining me I have Tom. Tom, say hello.
Hello, Ben.
And of course we have Josh. Josh, say hello.
I don't even want to talk to you after that joke.
I've been thinking about that all week. So this is episode 8, and this week we will be discussing Slayer's album, Rain in Blood, Toxic Holocaust with Chemistry of Consciousness, and Vektor, Terminal Redux. It's some mixed reactions. So I'll start with a bit of an introduction on thrash metal. Thrash metal being one of the cornerstone genres of metal, I think we can all say that with confidence, and was, for a time, the biggest genre within the heavy metal scene. I think it's safe to say that the best time for thrash was probably in the late 80s, early 90s in America, and came about largely in reaction and really direct opposition to the popularity of hair and glam metal, which had really taken over in LA at the time. No makeup in thrash. Although Slayer did wear eyeliner originally.
Yeah, that's true. They did. I can't imagine Kerry King in eyeliner.
So thrash has persevered, and it's in a bit of a revival in recent times. But even as straight up thrash isn't the most active genre of metal these days, there's a lot of activity in crossover genres such as blackened thrash, which I've discovered this week and I'm a big fan of now. So what does thrash metal sound like? Typically defined by super fast guitar riffs, galloping drums, spitting vocals, and I'd say the lyrics typically focus on things like war, murder, and a bit of politics in there as well for good measure. Although there is a lot of variation out there, obviously. You can't cover the whole genre in just 3 words. But so that's thrash metal. So, Tom, what was your experience of thrash metal?
I mean, thrash metal is one that you can't miss it. You know, if you're into metal, I would say there's a pretty damn good chance you're going to be into thrash. Definitely, spoilers. Slayer was one of the first bands that I got properly into. And it wasn't long until I got into the new wave of thrash, like bands like Municipal Waste, Evil, Bonded by Blood, Fueled by Fire, all sorts of stuff like that. Testament as well were one of my favourite bands for a long time, as were Slayer, of course. Everyone goes through that stage, right?
I started with the new wave of British heavy metal, so I was into Maiden and things like that.
Yeah, right.
Never really came at it from a thrash direction.
Yeah, similar to Ben, I kind of came straight in at, not new wave of British heavy metal, but like metalcore and stuff, so I kind of skipped thrash as well.
Yeah, so everybody does it, but out of the 3 of us here, only one of us did. But I think you're right, it's definitely the most common, because you start off with things like, some hardcore and some punk, like Blink-182, even like things like that as you're a teenager, and then, it gets heavier, and then thrash is kind of a natural progression of things like that, I think.
You can't escape thrash. It's a huge part of all the most successful extreme metal genres. You wouldn't have black metal, you wouldn't have death metal without thrash, and that's, death metal is almost like the kind of keystone sound in the scene these days.
So how about you, Josh? What's your exposure, what's your understanding, your appreciation of thrash as an art form?
This is where it gets challenging for me, because I never really listened to thrash. I don't have any opposition to it. I don't dislike it. I'm not like...
Why do you hate thrash so much?
I'm not...
Explain yourself.
I'm not like with thrash how Tom is with metalcore, but I just never got into it, I listened to bands like Silosis, who have a lot of thrash influences, which I liked.
Yeah.
I listened to bits of Metallica, who are thrashy. Metallica are a thrash band, and I've seen Anthrax and Slayer and stuff like that live, but it's just never really kind of hooked in for me. So it's been really interesting this week, actually, being able to listen to them kind of in depth and actually being forced to sit down and listen through some albums.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, thrash is quite an unusual one. We were saying this earlier before the show of how it's one of the few genres of metal that like references itself a lot.
Yeah.
Thrash metal has songs about thrash metal.
Yeah.
And like, all right, you've got Venom's black metal, but basically you don't hear black metal bands writing songs about how much they love the black metal scene. You know what I mean? At least not to the same degree. Like, thrash metal has this element of being slightly more, I don't know, almost like slightly more street in a way. And it definitely obviously started to cross over into things like rap metal. There was Anthrax did that whole split with, I think it was Public Enemy.
Yep.
And it has that, guys in like Nike trainers and like ripped jeans playing guitar and things. it moves it out of this conceptual kind of bluesy area that like bands like Sabbath are in, and it moves it into something that's much more kind of, it's like pure metal. It takes much more from a band like Priest than a band like Sabbath.
I think that was kind of my understanding and my expectation going into a thrash metal week was just straight up music, none of it like the atmosphere and the mythology and the doom and gloomy sort of stuff that you get with other genres. It was just, straight up fast guitars, fast drums, spitting vocals, like we said. That's thrash. And I think maybe that's why it never quite stuck for me as well, because I always do lean towards that more like atmospheric stuff, kind of the greater soundscapey kind of stuff. And thrash is just straight up thrash. Yeah. That's what it is.
It's what we like to refer to as music.
Music, yes.
It's quite like, I guess, like vernacular, isn't it? It's not like necessarily super high concept or anything. It's just pure practice, not so much theory, if that makes any sense.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. And I mean, as we'll talk about when we get on there, there always, as with any genre, there's room for like other influences and other ways of doing it. But you're right. That's a word that I've been looking for a while. It's pure practice. There's a practical nature to it.
Yeah, very much so. And I think even in the, like we said about the lyrics, it's very concerned with like the human condition, the human experience, oftentimes in horrible kind of ways. But it's very down to earth in that way. And it's not so, like you say, about black metal singing about Satan or demons or something. It's more, war, murder, drugs, like things like that.
I think that maybe we're giving it a bit of a bad rap here. I think there's like, when I think of thrash, I don't necessarily think of songs about like, like airstrikes or war or any of this kind of stuff. I definitely feel like, when I think of thrash, I think of a lot of songs maybe about like, at least tangentially, kind of with like a partying kind of feel.
Oh, yeah.
And they're political, don't get me wrong, there's lots of political songs, but you've also got things like Miserable Failure and this kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's sort of what I mean, is it doesn't live in like a highly conceptual world. It lives in kind of the world of the scene, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, it's very real.
Yeah, it does. It has like it's legit.
Yeah, I don't know how much things have... we should have started with this. None of us are particular experts on thrash.
Yeah,
but my sort of perception is that more classic thrash is concerned with those more darker things, and there's been a more like comical turn to thrash in recent times, like singing about pizza and beer is more common now, and it's always been there, but maybe it's been amplified a lot more in modern thrash. I don't know,
maybe it's just my own like kind of privileged cushy life, but I definitely like the pizza and beer thrash more than the dark thrash.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's a very versatile genre, and like as we were saying, it sort of touches all areas. And like you've got Slayer with their kind of dark and like satanic kind of themes. You've got Municipal Waste with their like pizza and beer sort of stuff. You've got like band like Testament who's singing like about some more fantastical stuff. They've got songs about like the witch trials and things like that.
And I guess what we're saying is that you couldn't sum up all the thrash in 3 albums.
That's exactly right.
But here we go.
Yeah. We've had thrash albums on here before with like Rash Decision and stuff. Like that's kind of thrash, and we will have thrash on here again. So let's put thrash metal under a spotlight and talk about some of our favourite albums, right?
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, let's do it.
I've had a lot of fun in Thrash Week, and I cannot wait.
Get my pizza, get my beer, let's go.
Yeah, because I suppose I just want to ask you before we kick off with this, Ben. I don't think of you as someone who's into thrash.
You would be right.
But I get the impression that you've dug into it a little bit in the past week, and could this be a new love affair?
Do you know what? Yeah, I think it potentially is. I think the good thing about us doing this is that the number one reason we wanted to do this was to listen to more music, right?
Yeah.
And obviously make millions of dollars. That's coming later.
Yeah.
Listening to more music was the first thing, and everybody knows thrash. I've heard a lot of thrash.
Yeah.
I've never really dug into it, but this week I've just discovered so much stuff again. Like I said earlier, black and thrash. I after the black metal episode, I feel like I really appreciate a lot more black metal, and then I started to appreciate thrash, and then I found out there's black and thrash. And it's amazing.
Thrash is really one of those genres where it's like you can't see the forest for the trees. It so surrounds you all the time that it's you very rarely take a step back and go, what is this thing that I like?
Yeah. And obviously there's like some huge characters in the thrash scene in the big bands that all have reputations, and you kind of let that taint your expectation of the music a little bit. So try to separate that a little bit.
Whereas black metal bands are murdering each other, thrash metal bands are suing each other.
A bit more civilized, really, isn't it?
So on that note, should we talk about our first album this week?
Let's do it.
So we are kicking off with Slayer's album Rain in Blood. So, Slayer are one of the most influential metal bands of all time. I'm sure I can say that with absolute confidence. They were formed in 1981 in California, and they're still active to this day, although apparently there will be no more live Slayer shows. We'll see. That's what they're saying, though.
So they say.
Yeah. So they're part of what's known as the Big Four, that being Anthrax, Megadeth, Metallica, and Slayer, who are 4 American thrash bands who really dominated the scene and brought thrash to the forefront of metal. So today we're talking about their 3rd full-length release, the legendary Rain in Blood.
I mean, is any more introduction needed?
There's a lot you could say about Slayer.
We're going to say 15 minutes worth of that.
Well, how about I kick this off, because this is a massive album for me.
Yes.
As is now well documented, when I did my paper round,
Yes.
when I was like 13 or so,
The well-storied paper round.
there was lots of System of a Down on there, and then Slipknot was like the first sort of heavy stuff that I got into. And I was into that sort of newer, alternative and new metal sort of vibe. I liked it a lot. And I had friends who were into metal, and I didn't draw much of a distinction between that sort of thing and anything else. And then my friend lent me Rain in Blood, and I put it on, and I remember at first being like, what the hell is this? And then very quickly being like, oh my god, this is fucking brilliant. And that was the start of a 12-year love affair with this album. Because for me, I mean, this is a solid 10 out of 10. And it was the album that really got me into the faster, heavier genres of metal, and ultimately extreme metal.
That's interesting. So for me, this was the first time I listened to this album all the way through.
Really?
Yeah, I'd kind of had some interaction with it before, so I'd listened to like a couple of the tracks, especially Raining Blood, but I'd never sat down and gone all the way through it. So this was kind of a new thing for me. And Slayer were one of those bands where I'd always kind of liked them. I think I saw them at Bloodstock one year or something, or maybe it was Sonosphere. I don't really remember. And like, I watched them at a distance and I was like, yeah, that was cool. And that was cool. That was kind of it. Like, it was fun, but I was like, whatever. And
you're going to piss off more fans of classic metal bands again, Josh, because you did this on the Priest episode.
We had so many people writing in.
a veritable flood of emails. I'm not going to piss anyone off, I don't think. I just, like, I don't know. I'd never listened to it before. Slayer were never a big band on my radar for me, but having listened to it, I did gain new appreciation for it, absolutely.
Ah, really?
Yeah.
Just never quite stuck with you. I'll jump in.
Right.
I had a lot of exposure to this album through secondary school, mostly because my friend Chris at the time absolutely loved Slayer, whereas I was the Iron Maiden fan, and I think we had a bit of a rivalry between us of who could find the coolest riff,
You
the
were
best
rivals.
solo. Yeah, but then I think we both did appreciate each other's taste, but would never admit it. But yeah, I mean, it is a great album. Like, it's gonna be hard to criticize it, I think, because it has got to be one of the greatest metal albums of all time, and definitely hugely influential.
I mean, it has such a kind of fast and like warlike sound to it. There's something about thrash metal in particular that it feels like you're listening to a group of people like ready for war, ready to fight, you know? This album feels like it's like charging with like swords drawn, you know what I mean? Whereas death metal's a bit more like, I am the beast and I will kill you. Thrash metal's more like an army swarming to kill a beast, you know? It has that just like, it's that kind of savage, muscular sound, and like Tom Araya's vocals in this are brilliant. Like, for me, anyway, the way he just like spits them out, and it's so kind of like, there's not much like virtuosity to it. It's very punk. It's just like, he's just throwing the vocals out. And the weird like high moments kind of in a way hasn't aged that well, but at the same time is like, it marks it as like, this is an album from the 80s, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I can't imagine, I mean, Slayer don't include those sorts of vocals anymore.
I found that interesting because in the 80s, this must have been a really intense album.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, nowadays...
Yeah, actually, just really quickly on that, while researching the album, it got temporarily banned because of the artwork, which is
amazing.
so restrained compared to the stuff you see like these days. Like,
Yeah. Even compared to the fucking lyrics of Angel of Death, you know?
yeah.
I feel like nowadays there's like I don't want to sound like a Puritan. I feel like it maybe has gone a bit too far in some cases. You know? And like, just looking back on this seems almost quaint now, doesn't it? Like,
It does a bit, yeah.
like songs about human sacrifice and murder, it's like whatever, you know. And now, you know, compared to all this like modern music where it's just like 10 times more extreme. And I think it's interesting, just kind of like a view of a more innocent time when this was controversial.
Well, yeah, I mean, like a band like Cannibal Corpse going into like the specific sensation of like pulling someone's like guts out of their body, the feeling of the viscera and the snapping tendons and things, like, you know, that compared to like altar of sacrifice. It's like,
A more theatrical time.
Can you
Yeah, it is. It's got more theatrics to it.
If that came out in the 80s, it'd be... Tipper Gore would have had a field day, let me tell you.
Oh my god. Yeah.
Yeah.
But the other
I
thing...
find it funny how her last name is Gore as well.
But the other thing is interesting is that you talk about the vocals, and the vocals were one thing that I kind of didn't enjoy that much in this album. Tom Ray does a really good job, don't get me wrong. I really feel like the savageness of the lyrics and the overall style of the music would be much better fit by someone like... I don't know, it sounds like... If I heard
If you
about
say
like...
Matt Heafy, I'm going to just block you from this.
The singer from like Ringworm or something, I think that kind of stuff where it's got this real kind of just visceral anger in it, which I don't think is really in the Slayer vocals, which I'm not saying that to like dunk on Tom Araya, because he's, a much greater musician than I will ever be. But I don't know. I think for me the big thing was definitely that I came of age kind of in a time when all the extreme music already gotten much more extreme, right? So kind of going back to this, I'm like, well, this is boring. This is really and it's kind of hard to look past that, because it's like it's just I wasn't there at the time. It feels like I kind of missed it in a way.
Yeah, we have sort of talked about that before, haven't we? Like when you go back to find out who was like the most extreme band in the 80s, like things change, like sensibilities move on.
I think and I mean I'm in a position where I probably was in a similar position to the people in the 80s, where I listened to this and I'd never heard. I'd heard really extreme, like Slipknot's first album is fairly extreme, really, and same with System of a Down. But like it is still pretty accessible. This was the first album I heard that was like, it was extreme, not extreme vocals or like extreme ideas or extremely heavy. It was kind of extreme music. You know what I mean? Like the music was harder to get into somehow. Whereas like Slipknot or System of a Down, you can compare them to like pop and rock music pretty easily. Whereas this isn't like rock music. The songs are much more like drawn out and like very different composition.
Absolutely, yeah.
Absolutely. It's not just rock plus one, like maybe System thing is. This is a whole different kind of...
This is a different beast. Yeah.
I don't know if this is a tangent, so if this is a tangent, please stop me. But I do find the whole like extreme lyrics thing quite interesting. Right. Because a while ago, a friend sent me a song from like the I think it was like the 1920s or something, and it was like the most foul-mouthed song in history before like 1990 or something. It was this lady being like talking about like how
I want to fuck like a beast.
No, like literally, she was like, I got something between my legs that make a dead man come. Like that was a lyric, and I was like, wow, like they did not hold back by then. Like I just find it interesting that like
that's pretty good.
It was like with the Hollywood thing, right, where they had this like really kind of loose culture until like maybe the 20s or 30s when they kind of got cracked down on. And then it took another 50 years before it kind of came out again. And it's obviously a different theme, versus kind of like overt like sexualization versus like this kind of stuff. But I just find it interesting how there's this kind of cyclical thing. I wonder in like another 10 years time we're gonna kind of be back in this situation or not. So
mate, it's true. Like you take that song, what is it, WAP?
Yeah, exactly. It was basically like an old time version of that.
Yeah, that's pretty explicit. Like that is kind of extreme. I didn't think we'd be talking about this in reference to Slayer.
Yeah, because we're covering that next week, aren't we?
Yeah.
No, that's the week after.
Oh yeah.
But like, those lyrics are like shocking people in the mainstream today, and you kind of think like, this is sort of what Slayer were doing at the time. Whereas like a band like Cannibal Corpse and stuff. Yeah, Slayer.
This is what Slayer were doing.
But a band like Cannibal Corpse, like now, it's just a bit like, all right, kind of heard this.
Yeah, but that's to us, right? That's to us. Like, I think to the mythical mainstream that we sometimes refer to, Cannibal Corpse is still pretty out there.
Yeah, no, that's true. Yeah. I mean, I do have a good friend of mine who definitely belongs to the mythical mainstream. I want to see what she'd make of some of this stuff.
So should we talk about the sound of the album?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I think Slayer definitely have just such an instantly recognizable sound. It's in the drums, the guitars, and the vocals. And I think particularly with the drums, they're like, I'm probably going to get the names of these drums wrong, so Josh, correct me. But it's like the open hi-hat and the snare sound of Slayer's drums are really recognizable.
There's such a gallop to the drums.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, but it's that open hi-hat. Like every time I hear that, I'm just like, this is Slayer. Like I don't know why. It just...
That's like quite a thrashy thing as well, that like the open hi-hat, I think. You don't hear it so much in Death Metal. They want like really clinical kind of like control over how the music, how it sounds.
Yeah.
Like you get a bit of randomness with that, because it could like vibrate in a weird way. And it has this kind of raucous feel.
Yeah, and it's the
low... Raucous is a good word for this album.
Raucous.
It feels raucous.
It's so raucous.
Or raucous.
But yeah, and we've talked about, the lower vocals and then the occasional like ear-splitting scream, which I think is very early Slayer.
Yeah, I love it.
And also, I think it's interesting, on reflection, listening to this album again for the first time in quite a while, the sort of gateway into things like black and thrash and sort of a darker flavour of thrash is very Slayer. I don't think you saw that so much in like Metallica and Megadeth.
No. Yeah, the bridge from kind of thrash to black metal, I can't see at all coming from like Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning.
No, that's true.
But I can see from Raining Blood or like Angel of Death or something.
Yeah, absolutely. It has like, there's a darker feel to it. The riffs have like an evil sound, like Sabbath have like an evil sound.
Definitely.
We talked about how thrash isn't necessarily like an atmospheric genre, but there is somehow an atmosphere of like great threat to this album.
Yeah.
It sounds a little bit dangerous. Ooh.
I think, Slayer definitely are the most, okay, maybe not the most, I haven't listened to every thrash band, but, from what I know, they do have the most atmosphere out of it.
I'd love to, in future episodes, talk about a band like Testament, because I feel like you've got the big four, obviously, Anthrax, Slayer, Metallica, and Megadeth, but people sometimes talk about, like, Testament being kind of the fifth member of the big four, and how they kind of have a bit of all of those elements.
That's interesting.
Well, I look forward to our Testament episode then.
And they definitely have real atmosphere, and they definitely have like real kind of mosh songs. And Chuck Billy is like one of my favourite metal vocalists.
No, Testament are absolutely like a really strong band.
Yeah, whereas Testament have a bit more of that kind of virtuoso sort of thing. I don't feel like you feel like that with Slayer. They're very fucking good musicians, but there is something slightly more punk and, as we say, a bit raucous about this album. Like it crashes along, doesn't it? And there's these amazing bits where like I think Postmortem, when everything stops and then it just goes bang, like straight back into it with an amazing drum fill, like it's savage.
There's a bit of a feel of like organised chaos to me a lot.
Yeah.
Like the guitar tone in particular. And I actually, back when I was in like a really cool garage band when I was like 16, we learnt Raining Blood, and me being the bass player, it fucking hurt my fingers so much, like trying to get all the way down my neck. But it is literally just like insane to play, and you're just like, how is this actually making a song? But it sounds great.
It's fascinating when metal does that as a whole, I think, when it's just like all these super complicated bits coming together. Because I was about to say that, Slayer doesn't sound like they don't sound like they've been to like, music school. They sound like they're kind of maybe they have been, I don't know. But like, I don't think that's a criticism either, because I think the level of songwriting ability on a technical level and playing the actual instruments to put together an album like Rain and Blood is really, really high.
This album was produced by Rick Rubens, who's gone on to, he's just been a massively influential figure in the metal scene. Oversaw like the writing of so much like System of a Down. You'd recognise him if you saw him,
Yeah,
and
for sure.
He's been involved with a lot of it, and he said actually about the creation of this album that they wanted to kind of strip back the reverb sound, strip back the idea that you're hearing this as a distance. They wanted to make something really, make it so immediate that like it wasn't, you're not hearing the drums are hitting you in the face.
Often highly underappreciated role, the producer.
Yeah,
absolutely. And I think it really shines through in this album as well, because the riffs are the riffs really sing over the kind of raucous backdrop. I think that's a really hard thing to do, and I think it really cements the thrash style for me, because thrash is a really riffy genre in a way that maybe metalcore and more kind of offshoots of it aren't so much. And the big riffs in this album, the riff in Raining Blood, for example, just like really strong. And I think also the way the riffs
it's got to be one of the best, right?
Play with the tempo, absolutely. But the way the riffs and the tempo integrate together, I think is really unique as well. It just, I think that is probably what made this album so influential later on down the line.
So Tom, I think this album's been pretty influential on you. What would you say your favourite tracks from this one?
So I tried to narrow it down, and I wrote down Angel of Death, Altar of Sacrifice, Raining Blood. But that list wouldn't be complete without Necrophobic, Postmortem, Piece by Piece, and Jesus Saves, which at this point is more than half of the album. But I think if I really had to pick one, like gun to my head, I'd say Angel of Death.
I thought that was a track name. Gun to my head.
I'd say Angel of Death is probably one of my all-time favourite metal songs. On this album, closely followed by Altar of Sacrifice. But I mean, you can't really go wrong with this.
How about you, Josh?
Yeah, for me it was Raining Blood, obviously. And then also, I really like Necrophobic. I thought like the tempo in that was really cool, how it got faster and slower and stuff. I really liked it.
They do. It's almost like almost a mathy, isn't it? The way they chop up the tempo in this.
I mean, me enjoying a math rock song is not that surprising, so I guess that explains it.
I was just, you listen to the drums and like the kind of stopping, starting, changing direction, like the tempo changes.
Yeah.
It did make me think, I feel like Josh would get something out of this.
You were right.
Yeah.
How about you, Ben?
Yeah, for me, it's obviously Raining Blood. Like, it's one of the greatest songs of all time, definitely. It's up there with Painkiller, but I still think Painkiller might be better. Yeah, Angel of Death's amazing. I really like Piece by Piece as well, but the opening line, Modulistic Terror. What is Modulistic Terror? What is it?
Terror that can be broken down into pieces.
Piece by piece. Bones and blood lie on the ground, rotten limbs like dead. No, I think I know like all the words to this whole album.
It's a damn good album, obviously. People don't need us to say that.
No, they already know it, didn't they?
I mean, I think it's like we're struggling to explain it because it's just like, it's fucking self-evident.
Yeah.
This is brilliant.
If you listen to this and you aren't sure about Slayer and you don't listen to the before, just ignore us. Stop listening to us making us fools of ourselves. Go on Spotify or on YouTube or iTunes, whatever you use. Listen to this album because that'll do a better job. And it's only half an hour long.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. It's a lot shorter than I remember.
Yeah, you get a lot of bang for your buck, don't you?
Yeah. Are you paying by the minute?
That's why I listen to grindcore.
Which you often don't pay for. So,
speaking of grindcore, it will be no surprise to anyone that my choice this week is something much more crossover, almost a little bit grindy. We're talking about Toxic Holocaust, Chemistry of Consciousness. Toxic Holocaust are an American thrash metal project influenced by hardcore and proto-death metal bands of the 80s like Discharge and Venom. Originating in the 90s, this was largely a one-man project but has since expanded into a live band as well. It has that singular vision that you get from solo artists. There's a really consistent style throughout. We're talking fast, fuzzy guitars, distorted vocals, galloping drums with strong themes of nuclear war, politics, as well as songs about eating rats and living in post-apocalyptic wastelands. Chemistry of Consciousness is Toxic Holocaust's 7th full-length album, released in 2013.
Wow.
So this is very much my vibe. Crossover thrash is kind of like a meeting of punk and thrash metal. That's something that appeals to me a lot. A lot of bands that I like sort of in that zone. Rash Decision, you could call like kind of a crossover band. A band like Necrofilth as well. Similar vibe. At the same time, Toxic Holocaust isn't a band I've listened to a huge amount. It's been one that I've been keen to get into for a while. I knew the hits, but not much else. I really enjoyed this album, and I'm interested to know, what did you guys think of it? I'll start with you, Ben.
Oh, thank you. Overall, really enjoyed it. Really good listen. Really easy to put on and let play. It's got a really solid sound. Like the effects and the guitars and the vocals go together really well. It's got a really tight sound, but it's almost straining to devolve into just pure insanity, like at any moment.
Yeah.
Similar thing.
It feels pretty manic, doesn't it?
Absolutely, yeah. And similar thing to what we said about Rotting Christ. I feel like the vocals have a sort of spitting lava kind of quality to them, like almost just very raw, very dark, quite almost lo-fi, but not lo-fi, and definitely not unintelligible. Yeah,
I was like, when I was trying to put into words what I thought about this band, lo-fi was a word that came up a few times, but I just didn't quite think it fits because it's like, it's really well produced, you know?
There's a lot of fuzz on the guitars and
it's distorted, like through and through.
What did you think, Josh?
I really like parts of it. I thought some of it was really cool. I really enjoyed it. So my favourite bit was when like the fuzz turned all the way up and it kind of overtook the guitars a bit. It almost sounded like electronic music. I thought it was really cool. I thought it was really unique. I thought it was a really interesting sound. I really liked that. But
which song was that in?
Particularly in Out of the Fire. Like when you kind of, the guitars get all the way up. And it's kind of like they just get overtaken by this fuzz, right? That sounded really cool, and I really would have enjoyed it if that happened more. I think that would have been a really unique kind of sound.
It almost plays around with like the DNA of the music itself. Something I like about that is that it references the fact that the music itself is recorded.
Yeah,
and it almost spills over into like touching the recording.
It's kind of playing with the fact that in all metal, like the guitar tone is artificial, right? It's all generated by a machine, basically, and even as an analog machine, it's still a machine. It's all like vacuum tubes and stuff. And I think that's really cool, and I think it sounds really good. But even though I really like that sound, and I liked the riffs, and it was really fast, it was a little bit too one note for me. Like, I really feel like I could have got the same amount of enjoyment out of this album if I'd listened to like Out of the Fire and Chemistry of Consciousness, and that's it.
See, I'm not going to object too much to that because I know what you mean. It's like, this is kind of, it's a consistent sound.
Yeah.
It's pretty one note in a lot of ways, you know. Like, they do different things with each song, and definitely if you listen to it a lot, which I haven't necessarily, I mean, I've listened to it several times now, and there's songs that jumped out at me, definitely. But it's so consistent in terms of its sound that, like, there is a bit of a blurring effect. Now, whether that's a bad thing or not is another matter, because to be perfectly honest, like, I am fine with that.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like I'm going to disagree with you both, because when I first listened to it, I thought the same thing. But the more I've listened to it, the more I've noticed how much variation there is between the tracks. So
there's at least something unique in every song.
Well, so you start with like Awaken the Serpent, which is very, very ferocious through and through. But then moving on to like Rat Eater, I almost felt there was a bit of like a black metal vibe to it. Like it starts quite slow and it gets quite impactful with that. And then Salvation is Waiting is a really rhythm driven song, but then moving to like Acid Fuzz, it's very lead heavy. So they all sound very similar. Like I'll give you that, definitely.
That's I suppose that's what I mean more, is the sound is very consistent throughout. Like it, however they've mastered it, that's very continuous. It's not like there's, you know, they haven't got a ballad on it.
True.
You know?
And I'm glad they didn't.
Yeah, I would love to hear them writing a ballad about this, about some rat they found in a nuclear
The
bunker.
songs are like 2 to 3 minutes each, which I think is really good, and I wouldn't have expected them to make longer tracks. It suits the style of music, and if they had taken, for example, Awaken the Serpent and made it into a 4.5 minute song, well, I would have been bored by the end of it, or at least I would have been like, okay, do something different.
So like for me, I don't think the song should have been longer. I don't know. I feel like they were a bit too similar for me, and I know what you mean with, like, they do change things up. I'm not saying they're all identical, but like I feel like it's a bit like if you go have dinner one night, you have bangers and mash, and the next night you have like sausage roll and roast potatoes. It's
delicious.
like, you know, I mean, those are both good meals, but like they're not really that different, you know.
It's the same. You're right. It's the same ingredients.
Oh, maybe I'm being too negative. I don't want to be mean to this album because it's
you're
really
not.
cool.
Don't worry, you're really not.
But
like after the Trivium and Devin Townsend rants, you've
the
nothing
thing
to
is,
worry about.
it just didn't do it for me. Like I think it's just it wasn't for me. Like I think maybe if I'd spent more time with it, I think definitely with thrash, it's one of those genres where if you really know it, you hear the subtle differences more.
Yeah, and it's I think it's definitely an album where I was like, okay, first listen, kind of sounds sort of all the same. That's all right though. I'm very used to that happening the first time I listen to an album. You listen to it again, it starts to distinguish itself more and more. Now I can tell the songs apart, and now I can really sort of say I like this song a lot. I'm looking forward to this bit in that song, that sort of thing. But I think what this album does, it does exactly what it says on the tin in terms of like, you wanted a really fast, thrash metal album, you got it. You know what I mean? Like, this is, if you want to turn around and find something that's just consistently like fast and heavy and like sharp as a razor, like, this is it. And I can absolutely put this on, not get bored at all, because it's constantly keeps my interest up. So like, I take your point, Josh, but at the same time, it's not a problem for me.
I do feel though, like, I think the interesting thing is for this podcast is we sit down and we listen to an album like a couple times through, and we write notes on it, and we try to, you know, have interesting things to say.
Figure out what
exactly. We have to actually have some coherent thoughts. But I feel like when I listen to music normally, I like put on a track and 30 seconds in, I'm like, boring, skip, you know?
Yeah.
I feel like if...
And we're trying not to do that, right? Yeah.
I know if I did that with this album, I would just skip quite a lot of it, because I'd kind of be like,
interesting,
like, if I start with like, you know, Out of the Fire, I'd be like, yes, cool. And then it'd be like, well, kind of more the same.
Yeah, and like, even though I said that I think there is a lot of variation in there, the sort of 4 or 5 tracks that I named were my absolute favourites and are the ones that I recognise. But I mean, there's 12 tracks in this album-ish, and I mean, a lot of them I didn't even write anything down because I was just like, okay, it's another track.
Yeah, and I mean, there's an aspect with fast music in particular, whether that's thrash metal, whether that's grindcore, whether that's, you know, various forms of death metal. There's something about it where it's like quantity over quality. Just like, get a good sound, write a shitload of good stuff. And it's like the good stuff, and trusting in the idea that everyone's favourite songs will jump out at them. The hits will jump out at them. And this idea that like there's plenty to look into in any given fast band's back catalogue. And it'll all be fun. It'll all be about the same quality. But like, it's not that experimental.
Yeah. That's fair. I definitely, like, I do feel, interestingly, like, the other week we talked about Project Mishram, who I feel are the exact opposite of that.
They might be the exact polar opposite of this band.
Totally.
Exactly, yeah.
No consistency.
And like we said with that album, you know, things work, things don't work. And then you have the really standout tracks, and then the ones you totally don't want to listen to anymore. Whereas this album, you can put it on, play it all the way through, and enjoy it.
Absolutely. I could listen to any song on this album, but nothing in particular really jumped out at me or grabbed me.
No, that's interesting. Like, this is much more my vibe than Project Mishram, but I feel like I'm going to remember Project Mishram for longer.
Yeah.
At the same time, though, I feel like this could easily end up being a really solid, like, favourite band for me. Not in, like, a favourite, oh, I love them and it's part of my identity sort of thing. But, like, I like their sound so much that I'm pretty confident. Yeah, I'm going to keep listening to Toxic Holocaust. I'm going to go and see them when they play. I'm probably going to buy a t-shirt and I'm probably going to listen to all their albums because this is my vibe. But, you know, I wouldn't turn around to someone and be like, if you want to see what metal can do, listen to this, you know. There's other bands I go to for that.
It's a difficult one because so Joel Grind, the guy who sort of heads up this project, he's done something really good. He's done it really well, but maybe hasn't broken entirely new ground, but has definitely created a very good sound. So it's kind of hard to criticize that, I think.
And incidentally, it sounds a lot like two of my favourite sort of bands that are much more on the grindcore kind of spectrum of things. One of them is Necrofilth, who we definitely will be covering.
Ooh.
Pretty close future, the not too distant future. It also sounds a lot like a band Slund, which is also a one-man project. Very fast, thrashy, grindy, very distorted vocals, similar topics to some extent, which I hope to cover in the future. You know, so it's very much in my area. Yeah.
So would you say this is the chemistry of your consciousness, Tom?
It's getting there, yeah. This Thrash band has the DNA of a lot of music that I like. I know what you mean. This is a hard one to sum up because on the one hand, fucking love it. Brilliant. Really like it. Could listen to it over and over again and not get bored. On the other hand, it kind of just is what it is.
How about, I wonder if we should listen to more of their albums. Or
I think that's probably the way.
Tracks.
Absolutely,
there might be a little variation in there that just makes it just hit the spot.
So it sounds like we all had our opinions about this album. It sounds like we kind of all share a similar opinion in a way. But I suppose what I'm more interested in is what songs really did jump out for you? What was memorable?
My favourite tracks from the album were Awaken the Serpent, because I think that was the best example of this album, and it's just ferocious from start to finish. It's exactly the sound of this album, I think, is summed up in Awaken the Serpent. Really good track.
And it does something that Thrash does really well of this, like, as I said, it's warlike music. It sounds like pure devotion to an idea in a way that a lot of other genres don't. It's so much energy given towards one purpose.
Yeah, it's not the sort of thing I usually listen to. And funnily enough, the track that is actually my favourite from the album is the one that's probably closest to the stuff I normally listen to, which is Rat Eater.
Yeah.
I feel like it had like a bit of a black and thrash kind of detour in there.
Yeah.
And I love just the lyrics, just Rat Eater. I love it.
I love the lyrics on this song. Feeding our fear with the meat of a rat, trapped in a cave you've been given, living a life on your knees, mentally rotting your prison, a sentence like a disease, Rat Eater.
Yeah, I like that song a lot.
What about you, Josh? Anything get you?
Yeah, for me, so as I said before, I've talked about this song a lot. I really like Out of the Fire. I also really like Deny the Truth. You know, I think I was maybe a bit harsh earlier. Like, there were definitely bits I really enjoyed, and it was overall had a really cool, like, fast sound. It just, as a whole, wasn't super my thing.
I think we've had this a couple of times where an album is good, and you like some tracks from it, but then it's hard to evaluate, and then we end up being really harsh on it because we're like, I couldn't put this into words.
No, absolutely.
I think you're totally right. I think that's maybe we should try and find a way to be nicer.
Well, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, it's all right to be like sort of critical and stuff, right? So let me just preface this with saying my favorite songs, Rat Eater, I absolutely loved. I love the imagery there. It's very much like reminds me of the comics that I used to draw, Vermin comics.
Nice plug.
Yeah, thanks, man. Acid Fuzz is great. It's got a really good animated video. And then I Serve sums up, as I was saying, that kind of warlike, devoted feel of Thrash, which I absolutely love, you know. It's all good.
Yeah.
Like, it's a great album. It's start to finish. It's so enjoyable. It's a little bit hard to kind of analyse it beyond saying, like, yeah, that was fucking good fun.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So it's like, if you hold it up against that criteria, how fun is this album? The answer is very.
Yeah, fair enough.
Very fun. You know, like, very good. Very fucking Thrash.
And then a call back to last week's discussion. I've been working out to this album, and it's good for that.
Nice.
Yeah.
Certainly is. Yeah, actually, that's true. Listening to the music this week coincided with me going cycling for 30 minutes a day as soon as I get up in the morning, and that is that's a good combination.
I gotta say,
Thrash metal and early morning cycling. Love it.
through this podcast in general, I have found a lot of really good workout music. Like when I'm free.
Josh is like got the body of a god.
No, that's the thing. You can run a 10k and still be quite pudgy. That's...
I don't understand that. How does that work?
Well, without getting bogged down too much, running a 10k only burns about 600-700 calories, depending on how much you weigh, which is like a large sandwich. Anyway, up next, we're changing our pace quite a lot, moving away from the world of war and eating rats to a much more high concept thing with Terminal Redux by Vektor. Vektor are a progressive thrash band from Arizona, United States. So they've also been listed as from Philadelphia, depending on what era they're from. They've moved around a bit, so I think it makes sense. They've been around since 2002, and Terminal Redux is their third studio album, released in 2016. Vektor sing about sci-fi related topics, and Terminal Redux is itself a concept album about a space explorer who discovers the secret to immortality. And there's a whole bunch of like politics and space government regime stuff going on at the same time. It's very cool. Very up my street. There have been a number of lineup changes throughout the band's history as well, which I am not very well educated about, but culminated in 2016, all but one member of the band leaving. Though they have apparently now reconvened and are going to release some new music, and I think something came out in 2020.
I like a happy ending.
Exactly, so it all ends well. This album was really interesting for me because I hadn't really listened to that much thrash of this type before, and I'd never really thought about like a thrash concept album before, and it was cool. I enjoyed it. I like sci-fi. I like concept albums. I think this was really good. There were lots of cool bits. There were choirs, which I didn't expect. The riffs were really good. There were sad, soft bits, kind of ballady, like Tom was saying earlier. Yeah. But it worked well. It didn't feel like selling out. It felt like it really fit the storyline of the album. And when you read the lyrics, you get a good sense for quite dramatic events occurring in the story, particularly in the final song. Yeah, I thought this was really cool. So, what did you guys think, Tom? What did you think?
So, a couple of friends of mine were super into Vektor a few years ago. And I sort of had heard the name a lot, and I'd seen like them wearing the t-shirts and stuff. And so, I'd gone in the past and kind of checked them out. And I kind of thought, yeah, it's all right. It's kind of cool. Like, sort of whatever, And so I was pretty psyched when you had the idea to, like, do this album. Because I had always kind of wanted to, like, get into them a little bit more and really kind of spend some time listening to them and stuff. So I was, like, really looking forward to it. And I had a listen and I was a bit like, yeah, okay. This is, like, It's noodly. It's high-paced noodly.
Yeah, that's
fast noodle.
It's warp speed noodling.
Indeed.
And the vocals are like a little bit thin, kind of reminded me of like Danny Filth in like the most recent Cradle of Filth. It's dropped out a lot of the kind of bass and like power of it. And I just kind of thought like, all right, yeah, very good. Technical kind of whatever. Like now, to my surprise, on second listen, I started to go, hang on a minute, I actually quite like this. It's kind of cool. The vocals don't bother me so much anymore. I feel like they kind of work. They sort of blend into the music a little bit. Like, it's not vocal led by any means. It's also not like lead led. And I was sort of surprised by how good the drumming was as well, because the drumming is not the kind of drumming I normally go for, which is like pounding and very kind of obvious. Like, I listen to metal that's very drum heavy, with the drum, like, Behemoth, like, you can't have Behemoth without a fucking insane drummer right up there in the mix. I'm at the point now with this album where I actually fucking love it. I think it's really fantastic. Good, but I'm not sure how I got here, and I don't know what it was that made me kind of go, this is not just good, this is great. I found myself with this episode going back and like listening to Slayer, which I know super well, listening to Toxic Holocaust, which is very much my vibe. More than either of those bands, I found myself putting Vektor songs on and just being like, damn, this is good.
Wow.
Damn, this is good.
I didn't expect you to like it that much.
Yeah, this is kind of a surprise for me. I mean...
Same.
It's interesting because I know you said you want to listen to them more. The reason I actually picked this is because I was struggling for an album, and Tom, you said, "Oh, Josh, you might like Vektor," and I said, "Fuck it, let's do Vektor." So it was really a happy accident, I guess, because this was really cool, and you really liked it. So we both gained from this. Yeah. So Ben, we haven't heard from you yet. What do you think?
I was surprised by the album, to say the least. When you called it progressive thrash, that kind of crystallized it in my mind a little bit, because it definitely breaks a lot of the rules of thrash as far as I understand them, which I think are quite well established.
For sure.
First of all, obviously the songs are long. They're like 6, 7, 9 minutes, which is really unusual for thrash.
One is 13 minutes.
Yeah,
And it's a long album. It's an hour and 15 minutes.
which was longer than both the other albums we've covered this week combined, right?
Together, yeah.
Combined, yeah.
But that's not a criticism, because I didn't find the songs were too long, and I didn't find they dragged or anything like that.
No,
and I had a similar experience between all 3 albums this week, which is that it kind of just flowed from start to finish.
Because it's fast, man. Because it's fast. You know, it's easy to have patience with fast music because it's like you feel like you're getting somewhere all the time.
Yeah, there was definitely a lot of variation.
But like, I lose patience with Doom all the time because I'm just like, come on, where's the good bit?
You're infamously short of patience, though. Yeah, there's definitely a lot going on in the track, so there's a lot of variation from start to finish in like each 7-minute song. So yeah, they do not overstay their welcome or anything like that. And I did just kind of, even though it's fast, I found I did kind of for a sci-fi album space out a little bit and just kind of let it play. And I really enjoyed it. I never skipped a track. I listened through it quite a few times this week, and yeah, I liked it a lot.
It's like on the length of the songs, this is something that like could put me off. Like, there's not that much music where I like long songs. I suppose, you know, black metal is probably the only genre I listen to where there's like long songs. I'm so into the sound of black metal that I can kind of deal with that, you know. This was like, they didn't overstay their welcome because they're epic as fuck, because they do all sorts of things in every song, because you just don't know kind of what new riff is coming next, what kind of like, there were bits where like the lyrics are punctuated by really fast like blast beats, you know, so every other like word is like you know, I wasn't expecting anything like that. And it's like, do you ever have this thing where you don't want to watch a film because you've seen the film poster and you heard the film name and you're like, that doesn't seem like a vibe, and then you watch it and you remember, oh, of course, there's like characters and settings and like situations in this film, and actually it's a fucking story, and like, yeah, of course it's going to be good. Do you know what I mean? Where like you have a hesitation for something because you can't imagine it like actually breaking down into things that you like.
Okay, yeah,
I had that with this album, yeah. And then when I listened to it, I was like, oh yeah, it's a fucking thrash metal album. And I love thrash metal. Like, obviously there's going to be drum fills and like really fast pace, and it's going to have really epic moments. Like, why didn't I think of that?
I do think the only criticism I'd have of being long tracks, and it's not even really a criticism of, it's definitely not a criticism of the music. Sometimes it was a little bit hard for me to re-find a part that I really liked. And maybe if it was 2 3.5 minute tracks, that'd be easier. But obviously they're telling like a coherent story, so it kind of makes sense for them to be that long. So, you know, it's minor criticism.
Yeah, no, that's fair. It is hard concept albums, I think, because, like you say, like you can't cut that much out of a chapter because then you're going to lose the narrative.
Yeah, exactly.
I think
which is fine.
I think they do pace this album pretty well. I think having like Mountains Above the Song, like as a
yeah,
and then Collapse as well.
Collapse,
as like,
right before the big long ending. I think those are 2 really good bits. They break it up nicely. I don't think I listened to this all the way through all the time. I think I'd pick my favorites and just put them in the playlist, to be honest. But it was really cool.
That's the benefit of Thrash,
exactly.
though, isn't it? It's like you can select.
Yeah,
a song
you don't
and be
need the whole context. You can just kind of rock out to like Ultimate Artificer or something.
I can't wait until we're finally allowed to have a house party again. And then Josh goes to put on a thrash song and it ends up being 9 minutes long.
Collapse, which is half of it is really sad, melodic, slow ballad singing.
And it's got clean vocals.
Trust me, I'm putting on a thrash song.
This is a thrash song, you can't skip it. Oh, it's only 9 minutes long, don't worry.
But yeah, in terms of the concept album stuff, like the song Teropticon?
I think so.
Teropticon.
Yeah, the song Teropticon, that was kind of for me where the album started to dig in a bit, and I was like, alright, I'm getting the vibe now. I'm sort of feeling the story. I'm like in the zone. And it started to become like almost like an escapist kind of feel where like I would put this on because you're kind of launched into this other world. Like, I'm always very influenced by album covers, you know? It's just the
the album cover was really cool.
I felt like I was on a spaceship going through a fucking portal in space. That's, you know, that's cool. I like that.
I do definitely feel like the end of the album from kind of Pillars of Sand onwards, which is just after after Pteropticon. Those 3 songs, Pillars of Sand, Collapse, and Recharging the Void, just that's that like 25 minutes of music, which is as long. Like if you took that out and had it as its own album, that was standalone as its own album. I feel it was just really good through that bit.
Definitely.
And like that isn't to like
absolutely
talk down the rest of the album, but just like that end with like Collapse, where it's got like kind of sad opening and then the big triumphant but yet kind of mournful riff. And then the like choir and Recharging the Void, like all of it just works so well.
Yeah,
I did struggle a little bit with it being a concept album and telling this really overarching story. And hear me out on this. I feel like the vocalist was singing in the sort of voice as an instrument kind of way that we've said before, and I couldn't really understand a lot of the lyrics. But then listening to the music and reading the lyrics, I really liked it. And I never want to suggest a change to any of the music that we listen to because it's what it is, you know. Yeah, but I'm gonna. So I wonder if with slightly cleaner vocals, maybe this would have been like where I am right now. Is this was like an 8 out of 10, but maybe with cleaner vocals where I could really get into the storyline because the lyrics are amazing.
Imagine this with like Tom Araya's vocals where you can hear everything.
Yeah, and if I could understand the storyline, I think I would have really got into this.
Yeah,
reading the lyrics while listening to music, I liked it a hell of a lot more. Yeah, it's just something that I was kind of thinking as I understood the storyline more. I was like, oh damn, I really wish I got more of this from the actual music. The music definitely suits the storyline. It's not really a criticism because I liked the music and I liked the storyline. I just don't know if they mashed that well together.
And it is what it is in terms of like, you know if you listen to a metal album, you're probably going to have to look up the lyrics.
A lot of the time,
because the voice is like an instrument and it's kind of hiding the meaning. Like, and on Afrak have lyrics. They don't publish them because it's like, you shouldn't need to know. It's like, I know, I agree with that, but like,
Yeah, so like the comparison to Aaron Afrak, I think maybe you don't need to know the lyrics in Aaron Afrak. I still would like to, personally.
Yeah.
But maybe you need it less because their music is like violence distilled into music. Whereas this is like
it's pure hell.
This is it probably is. Whereas this is a sci-fi story, so I feel like maybe
exactly.
I would have liked to have heard them all.
It's not just like the bleak sound like an Alan Afrak or it's a black metal or something like that.
You're just getting abused by music.
God,
I love Alan Afrak.
It's not so much about, even though it's atmospheric, it's not so much about the atmosphere. It's much more about the actual narrative, isn't it?
Yeah, 100%.
Speaking of the atmosphere, I really like. It did feel a bit like there was like a tiny missed opportunity there in the sense of like if you added in some like other instruments, like I don't know what, but like I got kind of like a Dune vibe from this, you know, like with the immortality.
I could so get some like synth in there.
Not even synth, but I was thinking like, you know, like so Dune's got this like kind of like for lack of a better term, this kind of like spacey, like Middle Eastern kind of feel to it. Like maybe something like that in there.
Yeah.
Like,
I've read half of Dune.
Okay, I've read all of Dune, so yeah, like just something like that in there. And like I feel like if that was included, it would like ascend to greatness. But that's very much my own.
It's on the cusp, isn't it?
Yeah, it's very much like riding that.
I know what you mean.
Edge.
I'm very interested to see what these guys do next. I think there might be an album after this one.
I think there's one in the works, and there's a split at the moment that's out, I think. So interestingly enough, even though they've had these troubles with the lineup and things, and they've kind of got back together now, they have just released a split with Cryptosis in February this year, actually. Yeah, and I shamefully haven't listened to it, so maybe our homework after this episode.
Yeah, I had listened through their new stuff, but like not enough to kind of form an opinion of it. This is a weird band for me in terms of like I sort of knew what they were, and I was like, okay, I'm probably going to enjoy this. Listened to it the first time and thought, you know what, I'm probably not going to enjoy this. Actually, I'm like, this is too long and it's just going to annoy me. And then I ended up really liking it. And now I'm like, I have the patience, I think, with this band to go and listen to everything they've done because they're so good. But I would be interested to see where they are in 2 albums' time.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
I think their sound, in some sense, still feels a little unrefined.
I wonder if that they're at that early point where they've obviously got this incredible vision, but maybe they haven't got the, honestly, like, it comes down to it sometimes, the resources, you know?
Yeah, literally. Yeah.
I wonder also...
Just like the fucking recording resources sometimes. Yeah.
There's been a couple of lineup changes. I wonder if that affects it as well, because if you have, like, a band who's, like, super solid over time, they kind of, you know, you build up your expertise and you get better and better and better. But if you're putting in new members all the time, I imagine it's more difficult to kind of do that.
Yeah,
so
essentially.
Yeah,
like,
that's true.
I really hope that if they stay consistent now, Like, they could really smash some new music out, and it'd be really, really, really fucking good.
Yeah.
Like, I really want to emphasize, this is an amazing album.
It would actually be really cool to see
very
this
good.
album
It's
just
very
played
fucking
start
good.
to finish live. Like, I
Yeah,
very much
man.
enjoy that.
Like when the Behemoth played the whole of the Satanist at Bloodstock, and you didn't go, Ben.
Cut that.
Consider this album, but also with an orchestra.
Ooh.
I could see
Yeah.
that. I definitely could see that.
And
Yeah,
on that
yeah, yeah.
note, what were your favourite songs? Tom?
Yeah, so Teropticon, fucking brilliant. I love that song. Like, just that was the song that really kind of got me into the vibe of the album. Pillars of Sand, I've come back to over and over again, and I don't really know why. I feel like, is this the kind of music I like? Maybe? I guess it is, because I really enjoy listening to that song over and over again. That was fucking cool.
How about you, Ben?
For me, I would say actually LCD, Liquid Crystal Disease, was probably my favourite tracks. And I really like, yeah, all the lyrics to this album are amazing, but I just really liked this one for some reason. It's on Epsilon, 14 billion strong, Cygnus has always struggled for control. They told me it could not be done. Lies! All they need is technogenic disease. We supply it for free.
Lies!
Oh, that's so good.
It's really
That's
good.
so
I love
good.
the it's like grim dark fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
It's
got
like
that.
40k metal, isn't it?
Yeah, it really
It's
has
almost
that.
like Blade Runner kind of thing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I really liked
Yeah,
that in
man.
Liquid Crystal Disease. But my second favourite track is Collapse, which was a really close second because I really liked the variation they showed in the track with like some of the cleaner bits and lighter elements throughout the track. So yeah, I'd say those two are definitely my favourites. So Josh, are you
Awesome.
going to be able to pick a favourite track from this?
I am, actually. So for me, Collapse was the best.
Ooh.
I just really liked it. I don't think it's that much of a surprise that I liked the least metal track on the metal album.
Yeah.
I did also really like Recharging the Void. I thought that was a great ending.
That was a
It
great
was,
track as well.
it was long,
Jeez,
but it
yeah.
really it was worth the whole thing. Really cool.
Well, we've named 6 out of 10 tracks there, so that's pretty good going.
Yeah, I ended up liking this a lot more than I initially did. I think if you had
Yeah,
maybe
same,
listened to it
man.
once, I
God.
probably would have just brushed it off. But again, maybe that's the benefit of the format here. You know, we have to listen to it, we get into it, and then we uncover things
Yeah.
about it that we really like.
Honestly, that's what I really love about approaching it in this way, because like this is an album that I would have listened through and been like, all right, fine. But like listened to it a few times, now I'm like, yeah, I'm going to see Vektor as soon as
You've
I
got
find
the
that
technogenic brainworm.
And I've got the Toxic Holocaust, the radiated nuclear brainworm.
So many brainworms.
Too many.
Yeah, great album, Josh. Good choice. Glad I recommended it to you.
Well, thank you for the recommendation.
Yeah, good choice, Tom/Josh.
Hey.
No, this was, as soon as I heard this, you definitely could have picked this album, Josh. This is so your thing.
Yeah, this is so you.
I
man.
initially
This is
tried
so
to
you.
pick a technical death metal album, but then you said no, it's not thrash. So
I was like, it's got to be bona fide thrash.
okay, right. I don't want to get
Yeah.
into this.
We can't have any
This
death thrash.
wasn't-
Crossover thrash is still thrash.
I think we should just
Crossover
try-
thrash is thrash, but death thrash, which is not. What that doesn't make any sense.
No, I tell you why, because death metal is a genre in its own right. Thrash metal is a genre in its own right. A fusion of the two is not thrash metal. Crossover thrash is specifically a type
What
of
is
thrash.
crossover?
Even though it,
What is crossover thrash?
crossover
Crossing
thrash?
over with Tom?
Crossover thrash is
Crossed
thrash
over with.
that includes elements of hardcore,
so-
right? Whereas death thrash is a 50-50 split of two genres.
So what you're saying is crossover thrash is a split between hardcore and thrash.
Yes, but it's an uneven split. It's basically thrash metal with elements of hardcore, right? Whereas death thrash is a mix. It could be death metal, it could be thrash metal. It's
Oh
a
my
50-50
God.
split.
This might be the end of the podcast.
So if I'm 51% thrash and 49% death metal, that's a thrash band. Like what?
Now, see, if you're a grindcore band and, okay, so Power Violence, right,
Yeah. Okay.
is a split of...
Okay,
Is a
every
s-
good point
is a
starts
split
with
between-
power violence.
Okay. Tell me about power violence.
Now, Power Violence is too much. It's too much. That's...
We can all agree on that.
Yeah.
Should we just, can we move on?
Black
Genres
thrash.
are dumb, okay?
Black thrash is not black metal. Black thrash is black thrash. You know what I mean? It's a mixture of black and thrash. But symphonic black metal, that's its own thing.
You know, I'm leaning towards
Yeah, but
that.
the symphonic thrash isn't half. Isn't half.
No,
thrash.
that's the point. That's the point. Death thrash is half and half. Crossover is not. Crossover is still
You
thrash.
could very easily have a crossover thrash band, like Municipal Waste or like something like that, which is
But Municipal Waste they can only be considered thrash, even though they have hardcore elements. They can't be considered hardcore. Whereas a death thrash band could be considered death metal or thrash metal.
Shall I go make a drink? And if you guys are still going when I get back, then can we just call it?
Like a death thrash band.
If you can't claim that it's one genre or another, it's a fusion, right? But crossover is...
We're saying the same
thrash.
things over and over. Can we please drop this? You were happy with the album choice, Josh.
Okay.
Oh, fucking hell.
What did you throw your beer at?
There's just more beer in that can than I realised. Oh well. Whatever.
So that was episode 8, a scratching of the surface of thrash metal. We covered Slayer's Rain in Blood, Toxic Holocaust's Chemistry of Consciousness, and Vektor's Terminal Redux. What a week.
What a week. This was great, man. I mean, like, last week we listened to Devin Townsend, arguably, like, not that metal. We listened to Project Mishram, which was, had some jazz tracks in there. A great band in their own right, but, like, not really the metal kind of stuff, And then we listened to
music,
Running
music.
Christ. It's not metal music. And then we listened to Rolling Christ, which is great, but again, quite different, not that traditional. It was great to like laser in, and laser is the word, to laser in on something that was really a bona fide traditional metal genre.
Yeah.
It was quite refreshing to go back and, thrash metal, as I say, it's a genre where like you can't see the wood for the trees. It's everywhere. You kind of forget it's there. For me, it's like your mum. You love your mum, but you just don't call her enough. I need to check in with thrash metal more.
Oh, a very touching sentiment, which I didn't expect for thrash metal.
The only irony of that statement is that I actually need to call my mum this evening.
Well, we better wrap things up. No, it was good to listen to some real proper metal.
Yeah, metal.
Yeah, metal.
Metal music.
No, thoroughly enjoyed it. Not a genre I normally dip into, but I've learnt a lot, which I didn't expect.
And I'm enjoying this like journey that you're taking, Ben, of getting, because I feel like I come from very much like traditional metal kind of genres. I feel like Josh, you come from the slightly more left field, like metalcore kind of side of things, and I feel like Ben, you're like I
definitely feel like the tourist in a lot of this.
Yeah, what's wrong with you?
I definitely feel like the tourist in a lot of this, where I've not really listened to a lot of classic stuff. Like even when I say like I was a Maiden fan, I was never, a Maiden fan. You know what that means?
Right,
I liked Iron Maiden. I quickly moved on to some other stuff, and then got into all the sludgy, stoner stuff I'm into now. And it's really, really nice to go and listen to these genres and actually feel like I can now maybe a bit more call myself a metalhead. It's happening more and more every week.
You'll get there.
My job prospects are dwindling.
I hate to just like wank off the whole point of this podcast, but like metal's a great genre, man, and there's so much going on in it. And like the people who don't get it, I'm just like, well, you're fucking missing out, because like, this music is fun.
Hell yeah. Okay, so what are we going to be talking about next week, Tom?
Alright, so as I might have foreshadowed slightly during this episode, next week we're talking about Necrofilth, Devil's Breath.
Oh boy. Okay.
A disgusting album in every account.
Brilliant. Looking forward to it. Josh.
Can't wait. I'm going to be talking about Reclaimer by Shadow of Intent, which is a sci-fi concept album.
Is it really?
Yeah, it's also
incredible.
To turn the nerd factor up a bit, it's based on the Halo games.
Ooh.
Yeah. So
That's
Master Chef. The Halos. Right?
Yes, that one. Master Chef. Ben,
Well,
what are you bringing?
So next week I'll be bringing the Kristet Unsint with their album Pervogenesis. They're a Norwegian punk metal band, and they self-describe their genre as narcotic gay metal. So
brilliant. That's right up my street.
I actually think you're going to quite enjoy it, Tom.
Brilliant, yeah. I look forward to it. It sounds like it's going to be another good week. It sounds like it's going to be a week of metal. I don't know. I just feel like I'm in the mood for some metal. So metal, music. That's what I'm after.
All right. Or metal, music it is.
Next week on the Metal Face podcast. Bye-bye.
With some music.
Tune in.
Cool. Well, sounds good. I'll see you guys next week.
Catch you this week. Thank you for listening.
Take it easy. Have a good one. Bye-bye.
Bye.
These sign-offs are getting worse. That was the Metal Face Podcast. Go follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you for Season Miss, Carrick Anger, and Separation for their music in the intro. And thank you to Johnny Peterson for transition music throughout. Go check out his projects at Heads for the Dead, Massacre, Wormvale, and Wombat. And most importantly, thank you for listening. Take it easy, and hail Satan.
So, Vektor are a progressive thrash band. Is that a genre of progressive thrash? I think they are. A progressive thrash band from Arizona, United States. Though I've also seen them listed as from Philadelphia, so I think it depends on what era we're talking about here, because they've moved around a bit. They've been around since 2002.
I don't know if it's that important. Oh god. Sorry, Josh. Do you think we can start this over just for the sake of my editing?